it's been a while since we've heard that jingle. It may be a little bit too long. I could go a little bit longer without seeing you guys, but that jingle, I need it every now and again. It's
I know what you're talking about, Mike. I missed you. Missed you, man. Missed you
I
too,
missed
Nick.
you, Mike.
I think the
Did you
viewers.
miss me, Nick?
I think our three.
I missed Andre. I missed Andre the most.
Yeah, I missed Nick the most.
I think our 3 viewers on YouTube would have missed us because we diminished our small circle of viewers substantially by just not putting any content out for like what has it been 3 months or something?
6 months.
We just went dark. We just went dark, and that was the end of that for a while. But we like to mess around with you. You think we're gone, and then we're back. That's what we do.
I also accidentally named my YouTube channel Two-Age Sojourner, which is going to create some confusion. And I'm not allowed to change it back for like a couple of weeks. so just bear with the confusion. There's two-age Sojourner YouTube channels. And
that's gonna create what little we have, and it's gonna sort of
it'll benefit me, I think. Yeah, it'll benefit me in the long run.
Now the other thing is we're back on track, and we've got another block on the screen, which is always exciting. Pascal Denault. I think viewers can see that the little name badge there on the corner. So if you don't know his face, you know his name certainly. And if you're in Reformed Baptist circles, Pascal is a legend, something of a legendary legend. Wow. And everyone's read his book or should read his book. The distinctiveness, let me make sure I get the title right. The distinctiveness of Reformed Baptist covenant theology. Is that it?
Particular Baptist covenant theology, because
you can't
they didn't call themselves Reformed Baptist.
That would be anachronistic. I get it. Yeah. Particular Baptist covenant theology. Yeah. It's it really changed the game. And we might get to talk about that book a little bit as we go forward. But so we that's something coming up that we're excited about. We also just need to at least say that the conference happened.
Oh yes.
So I'll bring one of these T-shirts for you, Pascal. And
great.
And then you can just wear it, and
you can wrap it.
It was a great conference. So we had a little time in Wellington, and then we saw so much of each other that we decided to just not do anything for a little bit. And
we decided to never see each other again.
Yeah, it was.
I think it was the first time we've ever been together, the 3 of us.
Yeah, it was, and it was intense, and it was like podcasting 24/7 all the time, the whole time, and it was good. It was
except we didn't record any of it apparently,
no, because that requires technical ability, and we don't have that. So. It's in the glory cloud now, and
really, so we cannot listen to it afterward.
No, I mean, I think someone maybe might have tried to record it, so we might be able to, after the fact, have some. I don't know, but I don't imagine there'd be. Well, maybe they're good quality. I don't want to say anything, so we'll see what happens, and if we get hold of those recordings, we'll put them up there. But yeah, otherwise, that's a lesson, right? If you want to come to a 2Age conference, you got to come. Otherwise, you're going to miss out. That's how.
There you go. You can't assume we'll have our act together and get it all done. Can't assume that.
Anyway, so
that's a good strategy to bring people along.
Exactly, and in Wellington, you got to pull out every strategy you got. So
exactly, none of this neo-Gnostic nonsense. We're embodied people.
Exactly.
It was an embodied conference.
Speaking about embodiment. I am going to see Pascal. I leave tomorrow, actually. So I'm going to set sail for Canada. And then, I don't know how it works. Like I leave Friday morning early. So I leave tomorrow to get to the little airport hotel thing. And then I leave Friday morning. And then I spend like 2 days.
You're Thursday right now?
Yeah, this is Wednesday. And then tomorrow morning is Thursday. So I go to the hotel. And then Friday morning really early, I leave. And then I spend like 48 hours in the air and land on Friday. So I don't know how that works exactly, but I leave Friday morning and get there Friday evening. It makes it sound so easy, but anyway, looking forward to that. Yes. And then we're going to be thinking about some more Glory Cloud stuff in Canada, and that's going to be great. So lots to talk about, and it will spill over in the discussions in the future. But right now, lest we eclipse our wonderful opportunity here with Pascal, let's take the opportunity and find out a little bit more about you, brother. What's going on? Who are you? Tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, first, very happy to be here with you guys. I missed you from, I think, was it in September, your last episode, or?
Yes, that was right.
Few-
Yeah,
When you put it like that, yeah, but it probably was, yeah.
yeah.
Yes,
February.
well,
Yeah.
well, thanks for the honor to be on your show. I've listened to many episodes for several years, and so I'm glad to join the conversation. So you might recognize by my accent that I'm neither from the States nor England or any English-speaking colonies.
Wait, let me guess. Russian.
Almost.
I was gonna guess Russian.
Yeah, we're like Celine Dion, French Canadian, but it's more GSP, Georges Saint-Pierre, who talks like that, with a big accent Québécois.
Yeah. Wow,
So I
sure,
can make it a bit more like that. French Canadian. So I guess there's similarities with New Zealand in terms of very secular society. And is the culture influenced by Roman Catholic? Or it's more Protestant in New Zealand?
We do have this very strong Roman Catholic, very, very strong, but not as strong as you guys. I think, with you, it's just part of that whole piece, right? The whole French. I mean, I'm not up to par with, the history of Quebec, but it sounds like Roman Catholicism is really the big deal there, right?
Well, it's not anymore, but it was for its entire history,
Yes.
from the foundation of Quebec City in 1608,
Yes.
up to what the historian called the Quiet Revolution, which was in the 1960s. It was a very religious society, Catholic society, and it was very difficult for French-speaking Protestant to survive in this province. But there was some evangelicals in every generation, not a bunch of them, but a few of them, like a remnant. And so the same edict that were applied in France with the revocation of the Edit de Nantes and the end of the toleration of Protestant faith was applied also here in the colony. And what happened is in 1760, the Brits did conquest here, so before the American Revolution. So it was the United Kingdom that invaded Quebec City, and there was a major battle there, and we lost. And it was a turning point in the history. So from overnight, Protestantism was came from being illegal to the official faith, or that was authorized. But what happened was that the French Canadian outnumbered the English Canadian that invaded, that eventually became the English Canadian, and eventually with the loyalists that joined after the revolution, they joined. But it really created two cultures in Canada. There was the lower Canada, French speaking, highly Roman Catholic, conquered people. So they didn't have much access to the enterprises, and they were not part of the elite and not leading the institutions. But they were leading in terms of number, and the clergy were pressing all the French Canadian family to, they called it the revenge of the cradle. So we lost the war, but we're gonna have control over the culture because we will outnumber the invader. And but in those years, for almost a century, the French Canadian felt that they were under the English control, and they wanted to get independent. And if you were speaking French and be a Protestant, you were you were from the other camp. You had the religion of the enemy, of the invader. So it was very, very hard for French-speaking Protestant. So they could not survive in a French society. So they either become Roman Catholic, again, to be able to get married, to have services in the culture, to be served by the butcher and any services that you could get, because no one would sell to you or buy from you if you were a Protestant in French. Or if you want to keep your faith, then you would go live with the English people. And after one generation, you have lost your language and your children don't speak French anymore. Yes. So we could not really establish a French-speaking church for almost a century. And in 1960 something, there was a revolution. It's the point in history where the Quebec institution, they dropped the influence of the Catholic faith. The before 1960, the Catholic Church was running education, health services, had the major connections with the political power at every level, municipal and township and the provincial power. But this revolution was a bit like in 1910 in France when they wanted to secularize the society. So the government wanted to have a neutral Department of Education. So this also was coinciding with the Vatican II Council and very ecumenical. So Catholics were starting to change their view toward Protestant.
Okay.
And there was also was the hippies starting, and people getting a bit tired of religious discourse and getting out of the church, and a major exodus from the Catholic Church. So from in a span of 1960 to 1970, there was really the table was set for what we call the evangelical revival in the province. It was like our first Great Awakening. So in 1970, there was maybe 20 French-speaking evangelical church in the province. And in 1980, so 10 years after, we're close to 500 churches. Wow. So that was the revival in those years, in those 10 years. And that's when my own parents got converted, were baptized, and I was born in that context after the revival. And so since 45, almost 50 years from there, it didn't change much. We're still about 500 churches, French-speaking churches in the province, but it's second, close to be third generation of evangelical Christians. In good terms now with the Roman Catholics. We're not fighting, we're trying to convert them. But we have a common enemy, which is a highly secularized government and society that are very despising and opposed to Christianity in all its form. Yeah. So that's about the.
I was gonna ask that, Pascal. So that with that kind of background in mind, like, I'm thinking, for example, of Ireland and Irish Protestants who I know are still very much so basically won't touch Catholicism or say anything good about it. I'm not saying that's I'm not speaking for all Irish people, but certainly anecdotally from my experience, especially the Protestants in Northern Ireland. They won't say a good word about Roman Catholicism. And I'm wondering, were your parents converted from Roman Catholicism or from sort of more secular thing? And how does that, what is the relationship now? How do evangelicals think about Roman Catholicism?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. It's a good remark. Yes, the context I would say would probably be similar to with the Irish. The first generation of evangelical Christian from 1970s and 80s, they were very anti-Catholic, if you are a Christian, you cannot be a Christian and be Catholic, be born again and be Catholic. So they were very suspicious of any evangelical that would call a Catholic a brother or sister in faith. The second generation from which I am is more sympathetic toward Catholics. Not saying that we would have close fellowship and see them as brothers and sisters in terms of the institution, but we're not anti-Catholic because we were not raised in the Catholic Church. We didn't suffer any of its abuse because there was many scandals of many places in the world, but here also in Canada, the Catholic Church has some sins that are in his background that people are very upset about the church for that. But yeah, our generation, there's less tension, but yeah, we're not ecumenical, so we wouldn't like hold a worship service together. But in my podcast, I sometimes have some dialogue with Catholics. So older evangelicals, sometimes they look at me with a frown and saying, "What are you doing?" and treating this theologian as a brother in Christ. And so the dialogue is I think is important. We try to just keep open the channels of communication. I think it can be useful and not doing, the cheesy theology of, well, we're all brothers and let's just love one another. Being able to discuss differences and debate together, but respectfully, that's more where we are.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, just following on from that remark, it really does stand out in my mind. I've sort of met, when thinking about the Protestant versus Catholic thing, people from Quebec and people from Ireland kind of come to mind because they have this, almost this thing switches on when you start talking about it against the Catholic Church in the conversations I've had, just usually because of some sort of thing that's happened to them personally, or they're just sick of that like thing that it caused, but they're not interested in Christianity at all. Not only are they against the Catholics, but it's just so scarred them from anything. They just don't even want to talk. I did jiu-jitsu with this guy who was from Ireland, and he asked me, he found out I was a pastor, and it took, I didn't want to talk about it too soon because I knew he was so against Christianity. He was so vocal about it. So I just wanted to get to know him first, and we became good friends. And then he found out I was a pastor, and he sort of freaked out, and he was like, "Well, what kind of pastor are you?" And because what happened was I was abused by a Roman Catholic priest. So are you that kind of Christian? Or then I married a woman from Benny Hinn Ministries, and she left me for the worship guy. So are you that kind of Christian? And I was like, oh man, what a mess, yeah. And then this is kind of how we have to wangle our way, though. But yeah, it sounds like a real melting pot in Quebec. I mean, a really quite a rich history, though, isn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, 1960, 500 churches. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I remember reading Don Carson's book, Ordinary Pastor, which kind of, I guess, touched on, he must have lived through the heyday of that revival, I guess, and ministered in that heyday.
Yeah, well, he was pastor in the 40s and 50s in a suburb near Montreal, and he went through the very difficult years, much of hardships, and some people, some congregants that they got converted, but they could not continue their life in Drummondville, being Protestant. Their kids were persecuted at school, and so they go back to Roman Catholicism. And so it was like a 20-year period that was hard. And then the revival came. He was not a pastor at that point, but he tells the story. So that's a very good book from many standpoints, from the historical standpoint, but also for the pastoral ministry and giving, being faithful rather than successful ministry. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, just we've all got South African roots, and to be French in South Africa was to be Huguenot Protestant, French Reformed. So completely the other side of things.
Isn't that? Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. Yeah,
I had an amazing opportunity we went on holiday as a family. We were camping outside Canterbury, and one day we went into Canterbury and went into Canterbury Cathedral, and they have a crypt where a French-speaking congregation has worshipped since the time of the Huguenots to the present day, like in the crypt under the church. So initially in secret, where you could go, and it still feels like you can feel the kind of the history, and it's like you can put yourself in the position of these Huguenots who were kind of hiding out originally, doing everything in secret not to get found out, and then apparently there's still a congregation there, but that has direct roots in the Huguenots who came over. Incredible.
So I wanted to ask though, in terms of the whole French, because obviously the culture piece, as it goes forward in French speaking, and how does that play out with the rest of Canada, and beyond the evangelical scene, how does that work?
Yeah, well, the culture and politics is divided since there was a first attempt to take over the province by force in 1837. The Patriots, they tried to make a revolution and overthrow the British power. But it came, they were defeated but there was still a movement that never translated into a political force until the 1970s, with Parti Québécois, the Québécois party, with the option of they wanted to do a referendum to leave Canada and make Quebec its own country, with René Lévesque, who was the prime minister in those years. And so we had two referendum that failed. So the Quebecers decided to stay, but it came very, very close, 49% point to leave Canada. So when I was a teenager and for the first half of my life, the Quebecers, the French-speaking Quebecers were, they felt we're not part of Canada. And if you ask any Quebecers what is his nationality, he won't say Canadian. He will say Quebecer. We identify with our province first. So we're kind of two solitude. We're in the same country, but we don't speak the same language. We don't have the same historical roots, same culture. But it's starting to dilute, to not being as consistent, to be with the globalization, the culture is kind of all mixed with American influence and influence from everywhere. So people are on Netflix, and my generation speaks much more English, even though my English is not quite perfect. But from the generation, you're going to preach to in my church next Lord's Day, but I have to translate you because half of the congregation, they cannot follow an English discourse. The older people, all the youth, because of internet, because of all the TV shows, they can understand. So they became less nationalist, less attached to their French language, and the culture is not, I guess it's similar in many countries with the globalization, with internet, that we're less and less specific. There's kind of even though we keep some local colors, the national identity is fading.
More and more. Man, so interesting. Wow.
Like, you realize that if you preach with a translator, you can't say as much stuff.
I know.
It's going to go on for like an hour and a half.
I did
2
have a
hours
little
of
moment.
preaching.
I did have it because we talked about it, Pascal and I, beforehand. And so I was just getting my stuff in order and thinking, okay, I'm going to preach on this one. That's good. I got the notes and everything. And then I sort of realized I'm going to have to cut this down substantially on the flight over because, we got to probably aim for around. I don't think I've ever preached a 30-minute sermon except for in India. So this will be challenging for me. I like to waffle, brilliant. I like to waffle. You got to know the context. You got to know the thing. You got to know how this fits together. I like to read the reference passage, let's all turn there and we just read it together. No, you got to cut all that out. Got to cut all of it. Who's translating though? You, Pascal?
I will. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
So you see, that's great. You see, yeah.
So I'll say stuff and just let you roll with it. So I'll just be like,
self-maledictory oath. Translate that.
Yeah. The endoxation of the glory cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
there's some great Kleinian phrases to throw in there.
That's a good secret because I did want to talk. I mean, people might or might not know, but I want to talk about your podcast as well. Coram Deo, right? That's it. And I want to talk about you enjoy Meredith Klein as well. So, that makes it, we've become friends as a result. And, we already had the Reformed Baptist thing in common. So that's good. But sometimes, you just need that extra Kleinian something to just kind of connect people. But yeah, tell us how you got introduced to Klein and just, I don't know. Whatever you've appreciated about him and where you're at with him at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Of course. I've heard the name thrown around when I was studying theology. I did a bachelor's degree and a THM degree in theology in a span of about 10 years. So I've heard the name in some articles I was reading, but I never really immersed myself in any of his writings while I was doing theology. Even when I did my research that became the book on covenant theology, I was not versed into Klein at all at that point. So and I was not much aware of all the distinctions in the Reformed world regarding covenant theology. I suspected that there was some different approaches and unity, but also discontinuity in our midst, but not recognizing all the different currents. And after doing my dissertation, and it was published, and this brought me to be more involved into a discussion. I felt I understood more clearly the covenant theology after everything was written, and people were arguing, debating. Presbyterian were responding to what I've had written, and I kind of discovered, well, it did make more sense, even when than when I thought I was writing it. And that's eventually
I could imagine, because that book really shook the ground a little bit, didn't it? It was, whew, what are you saying here? What are you saying? All these guys that we've been reading, the Reformed Baptist guys that we know and love, they've all been, giving us a baptized version of this and
Baptistarianism.
that. And then along comes this book, and my goodness, everyone was just like, wow, it was an earth shaker, man. So I can imagine you got a bit of feedback, which means you would have had to be on your game to handle that. Yeah,
but I was not prepared for that at all. I was not understanding it as clear as afterward, and with the debate that came. But it was very helpful to have those discussions. And Klein was I felt attracted every time I could read and hear some of his students writing about him. But it's really when the Glory Cloud podcast came on that I discovered Klein, And so I bought all of the books. I have not been able to read all of the Klein's, just here and there, but I've listened to every episodes, lots of them twice. Yeah, the Lee
and I know
Irons
you feature
fantastic.
in some of those Glory Cloud episodes. I remember at some point I'm like, there's Pascal. Hey, he's asking a question. Yeah, go get him.
I remember that.
Yeah.
That was
well,
cool.
that's the thing. You know, we feel that we are. Well, I think you feel like more Kleinian than I do. In that we're so close, but I still feel some differences with Klein in his covenant theology, especially with the Abrahamic. But you know, it's on the Pedo-Baptist side. There's no one that we look at as Baptists that represent a specific understanding that of our covenant view, that do respect the distinction between the law and gospel as clearly as he does, and the covenant of works so clear, and so we do appreciate him for that. But it's slowly that my appreciation for Klein, even after having written my dissertation, I was not aware how close he was to the Baptist understanding of covenants, because he's not flooding everything through systematic, but really respecting biblical theology and all the structure of Scripture itself, and so all the differences between the different covenants is not flattened out as sometimes we feel it is in the Pedo-Baptist world. So we still wonder, well, is he like a Baptist, closet Baptist, as John Owen was, and as Michael? I do believe that he's consistent with his view, and his Pedo-Baptism is not so much argued from the one covenant, two administration standpoint. And at some point I thought if there would be an argument to convince me, or that it would for Pedo-Baptism, it would probably be Kleinian.
It's the closest that's ever come, I think. To get, you know, because you know, he disagrees with Presbyterians and Reformed. I mean, he's on his own island in that regard. But and we'll talk a little bit around this next week. But he gets himself into real trouble with this argument, because, you know, he ends up in a kind of Constantinianism as a result of his view of baptism, which is the irony of ironies, you know, with Klein. And you know, we need a whole episode to flesh that one out. But I think you have to appreciate, for
the sake of the listener who doesn't know what you know. Well, you know, for the sake of, I'm just asking for a friend here. Okay. Yeah, just asking for a friend who may be listening in here. Not asking for myself. I obviously know. I know what Klein said about.
Well, why don't you just give us a quick summary?
Well, it's really fascinating, actually. You know, because like we've been saying, it's so distinct.
What do you want to know, Andre? Just fill it out.
Just tell us what it is. What is his argument for Pedo-Baptism?
Okay. No, so basically I thought you meant the Constantinian thing. But what he does is he basically says, you know, the whole false promising your child salvation, or being in that situation where you would be like, I'm baptizing the kid, and Baptists always ask the question, why are you baptizing?
Let's just all stop and appreciate what Pascal's doing right now.
Oh dang! What do you got?
That looks like a homemade brew.
It's an homemade kombucha IPA like.
Okay, there you go.
Wow. Okay, I thought it was a water bottle.
Yeah, I thought it was water.
You could hear something was going on there.
I'm drinking water.
Nice. Man,
it's a kombucha. Well, it's not kombucha. It's we call it jun. It's similar to kombucha, but it's something else that you can feed it with honey, and not just some
like a mead
sugar. And I just had some hops, and it's so great. It's like an IPA without alcohol. So it's good from Monday to Thursday, and then you switch to IPA on weekends.
Yes. Man, they have
very good.
So back to what you were saying.
This is one organized brother. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm looking at the visual. I'm seeing. I mean, like, here we are with our stinking coffee and water, and he's pulling out the home brewed kombucha.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's like, yeah.
I'm sort of swooning at the moment.
It's like we're ready to advertise something. You know, we're wasting a moment here. But anyway,
I feel like it. Yeah. So go on.
Okay. I mean, do we even care
before
anymore?
Nick rudely interrupted?
Sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's me. Open the bottle. I shouldn't do that.
You did it right in front of the microphone. It's like a.
Yeah, I know. And Nick is also like, Nick's radar is up. He's sort of,
felt like an advert. I felt like we had to stop and take it in.
Totally. All right. So, you know how we always, as Baptists, ask the question to Presbyterians, why are you baptizing the child?
Yeah.
And they struggle to answer that. They're like, well, it's, for this reason or that reason. And Klein also felt the strain there, and that you can't promise salvation. He didn't even think of there being an internal dimension to the covenant of grace. So what it is, when you get baptized, you're not being assured of your salvation. You're not being engrafted into an election per se. What you're acknowledging there is a kind of the reality of judgment. That redemptive judgment becomes his big go-to idea, that there is only one way to pass through the waters of judgment, and that is through the thing that Christ would do for us, obviously. And so, taken from the ancient Near Eastern sort of insights, when one would enter into a covenant, acknowledging this kind of this reality of judgment to come, lest one is in that covenant, it was not just something that you would do for yourself, but it would be something that you would do for all those under your authority. And again, you could easily do that. You could take your household and baptize them, because it's an acknowledgement before the suzerain that you, as the vassal, so to speak, is pledging. You're pledging everything that you have to that cause, and are completely consecrated to him. And so you can, why am I baptized, Dad? Well, because you're consecrated to the suzerain, and because of the judgment that's coming, and because that's the only way to be saved. It's kind of becomes a pledge in that regard. But the issue, we might as well, the issue that ends up rolling out is that it really is a Constantinian view of baptism, in the sense that, a king would baptize his subjects, because that's the very reason, they're under his care. And Klein does try and separate this idea of governmental authority from family authority. But in the days of the pater familia, it was really hard to do that, actually. Yeah. And so it becomes a little bit of a non-starter, in my opinion.
I think I remember on one of the episodes of Glory Cloud, weren't they entertaining the possibility, or maybe this was a private conversation with Chris, but if the chief of a tribe got converted, the whole tribe could get baptized.
Klein argues for that. He says we should really think about that for missional strategies again. It's going to create problems. He acknowledges it's going to be messy, but to be consistent with his view, he was not backing away from it. The issue, though, I think everyone does see it, and it's been interesting to see that most Kleinians have not adopted his view of baptism. So it's kind of, even though it's the most compelling kind of version for Baptists, because it at least gets us out of that frustration that we have, and that how can we promise our kids something unless they've you can't make these false promises, and it does that at least. But and Klein, I think, sympathized with the Baptists on that point, but at the same time, it's sort of like doesn't really get you anywhere. You buy the one view of baptism that's ever been in church history, by Klein himself, and it's a little bit it doesn't work in that regard. But anyway, so that pros and cons. It is, but coming back to your comment there around being Kleinian also as a Reformed Baptist, I suppose long ago I've given up on that kind of trying to align completely to his thinking on certain areas. And I found that as I dropped that whole thing. I was like, okay, he's just going to be Klein. I'm just going to be my confessional self on the 1689 front. That's me. But just as a thinker that really stimulates and brings you toward the text, not away from it, that gets you interacting with a confessional world. I really, to this day, can't think of anyone more riveting to read than Klein. Get past that language that he uses, and unfortunately is difficult, but I find it doesn't move me away at all from my convictions as a Baptist. It really just strengthens and enriches. So that is good. Even with you mentioned the Abrahamic covenant, even there with the idea of republication, I mean, there is still a process, a dynamic that I think Klein helps Reformed Baptists of whatever ilk to think about as they think about what could be, what is happening in relation to the covenant of works, be it the Mosaic covenant or something that starts at the Abrahamic covenant. You still have to think about that process of typological republication. So Klein is helpful in that regard too. I remember talking to Sam Renihan, and he was like, yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I appreciate Klein, just to kind of key me in on that concept and help to work that through. So that's good. Did you want to, I cut you off there, Andre?
No, I was just going to say, I think that's because my introduction to 1689 Federalism came from your book, Pascal. So I found that super helpful, because for me, what that book did was it framed exactly why I find Klein so helpful. Because on the one hand, I think that my struggle, I started in a Presbyterian church and grappling with that, and then worked for an Anglican church, and still grappling with the kind of covenantal idea of Peter baptism. And the thing that never quite sat well with me was the relation of the Mosaic covenant to the gospel, and the relation of the Mosaic covenant to the Abrahamic thing within a Westminster system. And I think, reading your book, Pascal, and also reading coming into contact with Klein, I mean, I can see how both of those are sort of solving that problem, that kind of awkwardness of the way that the Mosaic covenant relates to the new covenant. But I struggle with the kind of the Abrahamic covenant as a kind of as not seeing it as a kind of totally gracious sort of covenant. And so from there, I can see sort of Klein helps me out with both covenants, because I kind of struggled with that. But I reckon if I hadn't had Klein first, then 1689 Federalism would have had me, because it would have solved at least 50% of the problem for me, whereas Westminster was leaving me very confused.
You know what I love about when I remember thinking this so clearly, and when obviously Sam's book afterwards as well, when that kind of cemented things, because you know how in the Presbyterian / Reformed world there's this kind of tension. You got the law gospel guys, the Horton and whatnot, and they're sort of, I don't know, what do you call them, Luthero Reformed, you might say, and then you've got most of the other guys who are kind of more along neo-Calvinist tendencies and just basically hook, line, and sinker into almost functional monocovenantalists, and there's that thing, and I remember thinking, man, that must be tough to live in that world. And in fact, many Presbyterians and Reformed will say so. Like to live in that world is tough, because you believe in a strong law gospel antithesis and contrast. You are fighting against a lot of the stuff in your own confessional tradition. But as soon as our as Pascal's book came out, and as that thing got cemented and talked about more, for whatever nuances we want to work out with the theology of the framers themselves and the historical position, it's like I love the fact that we have now historically cemented the fact that there was a law gospel thing going on, and we have not let that go, and the default erring, if you could call it that, is on the side of law gospel contrast. So there's just no way that you can blur those issues as a faithful confessional Reformed Baptist Christian. And to me, that's by far the most important point of them all. The rest is kind of a way to bring that out, I think, in your biblical theology, redemptive historical groundings for that point. But yeah, I mean, this is the bread and butter. So
I think it's really interesting the way that everyone I've given to read that book has, which puts the 1689 federalism in the historic kind of Reformed Baptist position, and then the historic Presbyterian position sort of side by side. And everyone I've given to read that book has come away totally persuaded of the 1689 Federalist view.
Yeah,
to the point where I've had to tell them, it's not exactly my position, because they've come away completely sold every time. It's kind of created some work for me. Yeah, I had to rein them in. Like these passionate.
So I wonder, because I knew you guys don't identify as a 1689 Federalist. So what's wrong with
well, firstly,
view?
I am a 1689 Federalist. I mean, if by Federalist we mean 1689 Federalist,
I subscribe to the 1689,
and I'm a Federalist. Right? So it's like saying you're not a 1689 Reformed Covenant theologian.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll rephrase that. But what's wrong in your view with 1689 Federalism?
Like trademark, the brand trademark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first problem is it sounds too close to federal vision.
Yes.
So Mike and I once,
in fact, Andre has made this mistake repeatedly,
so many times. I just
1689 federal visionism. No,
that's right. Yeah, I've misnomed it. So
we must be clear. We must be clear. It sounds the same. It is not the same in substance by any stretch of imagination. Right? So just be clear to everyone listening. When Andre makes confusing comments like that, it does not mean.
You hear me talk about federal vision, which I probably will in this conversation. I'm not talking about federal vision.
He doesn't mean federal vision. He means 1689 federalism.
Yeah, and 1689 federalism is the antidote to.
Yes,
that's right. That's right.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, we have actually done a series. I mean, we had Brandon. I mean, my goodness, we probably need to talk it up again. But years ago.
Brandon Adams.
Yes, Brandon Adams. And very helpful. Everyone knows his stuff on 1689 federalism. And, I really tried to nut it out at that point. And where I landed was, I've had sort of repeated conversations since with other key thinkers in the area. And I think, it often just comes, it does depend on the person that you're talking to some degree or another. But say, for example, when I'm talking to Sam Renian, who I think would be a fair representation of the whole concept, it seems like, we're largely stuck on semantics. It really does. And what I mean by that is, like, are we saying the word administration of covenant of a covenant grace in the Old Testament? Or is there a retroactive application of the new covenant, which is effectively exactly the same in meaning when you get down to it? So at that level, that helps, I think. And also it helps that what I love about it, and what I am definitely closer to 1689 federalism on than any other form of covenant theology beyond law. And we've already mentioned the law gospel thing. That's key. But the other thing would be that, I think with covenant theology, there is a brand of classic covenant theology that will acknowledge that the covenant of grace, covenant of works, the covenant of redemption, these are all theological constructs, systematic constructs. You're not going to find those terms in your Bible. They are important. They do come from an exegetical outworking, but they're not there. So when we talk about the Abrahamic covenant, I think good representatives of this view of classical covenant theology will say the Abrahamic covenant is not the covenant of grace. So they'll use that very language. And they'll say, no, the covenant of grace we believe is coming from this, and they will associate the meaning. But technically speaking, it's a construct versus the exegetical reality. What I like about 1689 federalism is, again, it makes that really clear in that you've got, when you're dealing with the Abrahamic covenant, you have to deal with it as a thing. Mosaic covenant, deal with it as a thing. And then, deal with the new covenant as a thing, and then find out how the thing relates to the thing, and then just work it out from the ground up. And I think that definitely keeps the systematic construct at bay, because I think we can have a little bit of a wild time with those terms we come up with sometimes. We're just throwing them around and they become a thing unto themselves, and then this becomes this, and this is why we're baptizing our children, and this is why we're doing this, and nothing needs explanation anymore. So I feel like that I have to work hard within a confessional Reformed Baptist scenario to show what I believe to be true about a administration of the retroactive application of the new covenant in the old covenant, and through the old covenant order, starting all the way from Adam all the way through to the New Testament itself. I like that I have to work for that. I think that will always be a healthy thing. So I know that doesn't answer the question of differences, but I think that's an important point that no one really talks about.
Yeah. Well, I think you touch on some very important distinctions. I would like to hear you guys on the duality of the Abrahamic covenant. If you see some dual aspect to it, coming down basically to law and gospel, law represented by the circumcision and the obligation to keep, to be perfect. That was what was required from Abraham. But at the same time, how the grace is revealed to him. And so basically, if we do accept the dual structure of covenant theology, old covenant, new covenant, the typical and the eschatological or the antitype, can we say that it's there already there into Abraham and doing the exegesis of Abraham based on Galatians 3 and 4?
Yeah, I got a lot to say about this, but I'll just anyone want to chime in there?
Well, I mean, let me throw in a few ideas, and it's answering part of what you asked, and maybe it's just I want to refine, bring in some new concepts and definitions. I think we have legal elements that are in a relationship of a typological overlay, not only on the Abrahamic covenant, but in several parts of the Old Testament. So if you go to Noah, and he is a righteous man, and he seems to receive things on account of his righteousness. We see Abraham, who's a righteous man, who seems to receive things on account of his righteousness. We see David, who is a righteous man, who seems to receive things on account of his righteousness. We recognize that there's a typological overlay that's pointing us forward to our covenant representative, who through his righteousness will obtain things for us through his righteousness. And so, when I look at the Abrahamic covenant, I'm seeing those typologically overlaid legal elements. I don't feel the need to sort of characterize the whole thing in a legal way. So I found myself sort of in between a bunch of positions, trying to enter into some nuance at that point. But,
and to add to that, I think one of the key things for me, like you said, Pascal, is reading covenant theology through the window of Galatians 3, which is very, very important. And in particularly particularly about Galatians 3 is so important to me is the law gospel distinction that he sets up between Abraham and Moses. So that's what I struggled with so much when I was, in a Presbyterian and Anglican system. Also not only that, but also his description of how the later covenant with Moses cannot amend the promises which are freely given. The covenant established with Abraham on the basis of promise that can't be amended later once it's done. And so I see those promises ratified in the promises of Genesis 12 ratified in Genesis 15, which means when I get to Genesis 17, Genesis 21, I think that I find it very difficult through that lens of Galatians 3 to see those as adding some other aspect or some law aspect, some duality there within the covenant of grace beyond the typological overlay that Nick was talking about, precisely because of how sharp the dichotomy is for Paul in Galatians 3 between between that which is by promise and that which is by law.
Mm-hmm.
So I think viewing it through that window, that's why I struggle. Like Genesis 15 is just so persuasive for me as a complete demonstration of the total royal grant covenant nature of what's happening.
Gracious.
Unilateral. It's a I will. Abraham's asleep. Yeah. The whole thing is a vision. The covenant terms, all the sanctions all fall on God for needing to keep this. I mean, it's just so striking. So then to get to Genesis 17, I think I'm more inclined to see circumcision there in a kind of Romans 4 sort of way, that this is a sign and seal of what is received by faith. I don't know if these guys would agree with that, but that's kind of the way that I would then read that. And then the requirements to keep the law I would see as strongly typological references. So there's kind of multiple levels going on there, but not in terms of what kind of covenant it is.
And do you see the circumcision, the entire circumcision in the Bible based on Romans 4, or is Romans 4 explaining specifically the circumcision of Abraham? But
for me, yes, yeah. So for me, I think Romans 4 is talking about Abraham's faith and then the sign and seal of his faith, whereas in Galatians, obviously, circumcision is connected to the covenant with Moses. I mean, it is a little bit confusing that circumcision is the sign and seal of both covenants. I acknowledge that, and I think my best explanation for why there aren't variations in the signs and seals is because they are united in their pointing forward to the coming of the male offspring, who's the male offspring of Eve, but also the male offspring of Abraham, and so it's all kind of pointing in that direction. So you've got the same sign, but yeah,
that's just one covenant. That's what you're saying. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say you got to be careful with that because there is. Well, actually, before I get onto this, let me just add two other sub-points to just fill out, because there's a great sort of array of things there that sort of I think are reasons for pause and just ways to think about this. The other one is whether you buy Klein's definition of, well, actually, let's go one layer deep. Okay, excuse the pun on the layer thing, but you do have to go into the layers of Klein, because I think you mentioned, Pascal, the duality aspect in the Abrahamic covenant. I mean, as Baptists, I think just across the board, we're seeing, listen, there's something typological going on here that is not repeated in the administration of the new covenant. And there is something that, connects us somehow, we just need a way to describe that. And I, again, what Klein does, perhaps uniquely so, with unique clarity maybe, is he really does show you there is a works thing going on in Abraham. So he doesn't skirt away from that, which is something that I like. It's just that he doesn't explain it by a way of this being a covenant of works. So, I'll come back to why that is in a second primarily. But in terms of that explanation that he gives, I think I find it so compelling as it runs through, not only from Abraham, but really from Noah and even before that, all the way through to the end, where he's got this two-layered thing happening, where, the layers of the cake, where you've got the substance working itself out, and then this it's the realm of grace is never meeting the realm of works ever. It is only ever by grace alone that anyone is saved, by the looking forward to the Messiah and so forth. It is just purely of grace. And then there's this other layer on top of it, a typological layer, a unique layer, not continuing through to the new covenant, which has no grace. It's only works. So you have works and grace opposed to one another, or in antithesis with one another, and yet subserving the process of giving legibility to Christ's work. So, that does, I think, for me, as I look at that, I love the way that it not only accounts for those very strong, I mean, you read Genesis 22, for example, after after, is it 22 or 21? I'm having a blank. 22.
22.
After he, after he,
okay, I was wrong.
Yeah. You know, with Isaac, and then the angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "Listen, you know, here's what you're gonna get now." You know, which is basically the whole Old Testament, and this is because of what you have done. You know, it's just like really unmistakable. And it's almost like something that you would imagine God saying to Christ. You know, that's the only one that really gets commendation like that. And you know, so you have to account for that works language to the extent that it fits in with the rest of the works typology. And I think what Klein does is he gives you a way to do that right through the Old Testament. But then you think, okay, well, why doesn't he just go ahead and say that that's the covenant of works, starting over there and republished and whatnot? And I think it's whether you buy his definition of a covenant of works and a covenant of grace. You know, that's the big thing to really work on, because Klein has this way of categorizing things. If man makes the oath, then even if God makes the oath, it is a covenant of works, post-fall definitions, right? So you get to the Mosaic covenant, very clearly that is happening. You get to the Abrahamic covenant, clearly that's not happening. And, you know, he has a big argument that we will need longer than this to talk about. But, you know, that's the thing to work on, whether you buy that definition or not, because that will then get you to the principle of promise inheritance. So in each of these instances, you know, you're asking the question, not does it sound workish? Does it sound gracish? You know, how are the two interplaying? You're asking the question, on what basis is the promised inheritance given? Is it a principle of works or a principle of grace? And so, you know, all of these things will contain things that people have to do and works oriented something or other. But the principle itself of the inheritance, the promised inheritance, will be sworn by God alone. The malediction will be taken by him or not. You know, that's the big issue that you have to work on. And then just one more thing, and I'll stop my monologue, but just coming back to Andre's thing, in that, yeah, I mean, I think when you start thinking about signs and seals and stuff like that, and what's happening with circumcision, I think you have to be really careful with this. And I think Klein alerts us to this probably more than most, maybe even in the Baptist world. But you have to think about it not as a systematic construct, you know, that now we're only thinking is if this is a sign of his faith, a seal of his faith, therefore it must be one covenantal administration and, you know, into one covenantal essence in two administrations, or however we talk about it. Rather, what you have to think about it as is this covenant that God made, which had a certain promised principle of inheritance that is now being given a seal concerning, or a sign concerning, and then that moves forward and is given, you know, it moves into another covenant made with Moses that on any Vossian grounds needs to be considered by its own contours anyway, and needs to be thought of as, you know, in relation to the sign that's given with that particular covenant that's made on a different basis of promised inheritance. And then you have to piece all that together. Then the systematic theology comes along. But these nuances are all important, I think, because what it does for me is it means I'm not going to just go and say, you know, the old form of baptism was circumcision, you know, end of story. I'm going to see a parody there at some level. I'm going to see some sort of analogy there. I'm going to see it sort of makes sense what Paul is saying, that all are pointing to the promised seed. But really, the new covenant institution with its sign is what you're focused on alone by way of its administration. You're not gleaning any other covenantal, you know, insights in that regard from other covenantal administrations. So, you know, I think that's a big part of it. If that's a mouthful, but does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense to me.
Well, it does make sense, but I think by having a 2-layer cake, you're baking all the covenants.
Having my cake and eating it too?
Well, not exactly, but I rather have 2 cakes based on Galatians 4. And I think that it's important that we take that chapter into account when we look back to the Abrahamic and Mosaic and how it's related with the new covenant, because Klein is and those who follow in his steps is kind of separating Abraham from Moses, but it's I think it's easier to see the connection between Abraham and Moses because of the continuity of the circumcision, and it's the same people, and it's based on same promise of a land, and so there are typological elements to it that are not connected directly in themselves to the eternal heavenly kingdom of God, but at the same time we know that they're pointing to something else. And so there are two layers, but they are not in the same cake. And if we see the cake as being the covenant,
could I just for the sake of clarity, also just in terms of the Noah covenant, or even Noah himself, just to get your take on this, would you? When he was blameless in his generation, God singled him out and so forth, and said he becomes this kind of like Noah, rest. This fulfillment of the Messiah, the seed, or the not the Messiah quite yet, but the seed promise, and the one who by his obedience would effectively create a means through which to pass through the waters of judgment and enter into the new creation. It's a very, very powerful type of Christ. And that language that's used in Genesis 6. So Klein again, explains it. There we go. There's the works type. There it is. We're seeing that thing that's happening. Noah himself, of course, was a sinner saved by grace, and but in terms of that unique type that's going on there, would you agree with him on that, on all of that, or were you? I
think that typology gives us a earthly representation of heavenly realities, and that we get the reality, the eschatological realization of the type in Christ, and they're all connected. By putting together two covenants, saying it was just a revelation of the new covenant that is the real thing, and the rest was just the shelf around it, and we should not confuse them and mix them, otherwise we're mixing the law and gospel.
So the type itself is kind of law oriented. It's showing this need to work and earn salvation.
But I wouldn't necessarily say it's law oriented. It's earthly. It's typological. It's not eschatological. It's not necessarily serving like Exodus is a type of redemption, but you could be redeemed from Egypt and go to hell.
Right. Now, but I'm more asking along the lines of whether you agree with, so what is being typed, the thing being imaged in the type, is that the need for someone to work to earn our salvation that's being imaged?
Well, there is different elements of what is being typed, but it's sometimes it's the necessity of having a righteous man, but I was referencing the type of the Exodus. It's how God is being gracious, and the lamb is shedding his blood. So it's the type of the grace, and it was gracious, but it was not a eschatological grace, or a grace that gave you eternal life.
Yes.
It was giving you a earthly life outside of bondage from Egypt.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, we're in agreement on that point for sure.
Yeah, but I think that the way we relate the substance, the heavenly substance with the earthly type or the shadow, they are intertwined, and we cannot separate them. But as the plan of salvation will unfold, what the later revelation shows to us, there were two reality going on at the same time, and it's based on two covenants: the covenant of grace and earthly typological covenant that is not exclusively law covenant or covenant of works, because also in the Mosaic covenant there is grace element with all the sacrifices which show God's grace forward, and it's how God is being patient and gracious. So it's not just about how you will accomplish your own salvation, but go ahead.
Well, that's a very, very important point, because I just want to emphasize that, with Klein aside, well, I certainly don't want to ever give the indication that I believe, let me use me rather than Klein, otherwise I start, perhaps falsely misrepresenting him and whatnot, but that the Abrahamic covenant is the covenant of grace, or that the Mosaic covenant is the covenant of works. I just don't think that that's true. It is a mixed covenant, in that sense. It's an exegetical reality. As you've just pointed out, there are lots of things going on. They're neither the new covenant nor, the covenant before the fall. And there's, I think, one of the big confusions that comes into place is when I see anyway, the systematic construct gets collapsed into the exegetical, covenant itself. So when I say it is a fundamentally gracious covenant, versus a fundamentally works-oriented covenant, what I'm trying to do there is use language that's different to, the covenant of grace, as the Presbyterians might do, or the covenant of works, as the Jeffrey Johnson crowd might do for the Mosaic covenant. And I want to make sure to see that, that's not undermining these very complicated issues of typology and gracious realities that run through all the way. And neither do I want to diminish the exclusivity and uniqueness of the new covenant. That is, in history, obviously, it's like a no-brainer that is the thing. That's the one. And so, again, this puts me in profound agreement with everything the 1689 Federalists are saying, and very helpfully putting on the table. So as I've often said, I would very easily err in that direction rather than any other direction. It's just me trying to be a stickler for detail. That's really, it's kind of
maybe
irritating.
I can articulate it this way. I think we see different administrative implications for the legal realities that are spoken about in the New Testament, where some would say that implies a certain administrative construction, where we would say, well, we can account for that legal element through progressive typological overlay, rather than having to typify the whole covenant in one way.
In some ways it's just much less, it's seeing the covenants much less.
So in substance, we're agreeing with the gracious salvation part, and we're also agreeing that there's these legal things that are all over it.
Agreeing with the typology part.
What are the administrative implications of the legal elements? Are we saying that this necessarily infers how we whether we see the Mosaic as a covenant of works, or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And there you pointed out the exegesis of Galatians 3 and 4, you guys, Andrea and Pascal. I think that, it'll take a whole thing to do it, but I think that's super important. It comes down to exegesis at some level, I think, what we make of that thing that Paul is saying. Because I think, you would read him, either he's saying, listen, there's a thing that comes later that doesn't annul this thing here that was already in place, and the two are antithetical, and that's the one I'm preaching, and God preached the gospel to Abraham, therefore that's what I'm preaching here, and so forth. Or he's saying, hey, there is this one unified thing that had these multifaceted kind of ideas that I'm bringing out, emphasizing both of them as latent to the thing I'm preaching, and you're going wrong with your application of the law in this direction, and so forth. And that's what it is. It's just kind of, we want to try and be as close as we can to understanding Paul on those elements. Let me not miss the opportunity to switch over on the legal stuff, on the law and whatnot. We're going to be talking about theonomy next week, along with cultural engagement and so forth. I think we're all super interested. I mean, I'd love to keep going with this topic as well, but just we'll come back. We'll do another one. But just to kind of put this all on the table, we're all super interested to know how it's gone there with the whole kind of theonomy thing, and with Trump and I don't know, the mission of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a lot of it is in Canada, and there's a lot of stuff that's come out of there, and just how you guys have gone with it, and how the Reformed Baptists have handled it, and what the climate is like in that regard, and where you are.
Well,
your opinion on things.
Yes, well, it's the beginning of the mere Christendom, or Christendom 2.0, that is starting with Trump being elected. I had a podcast last week with Henri Blocher. Do you know Henry Blocher? Blocher?
Oh,
I don't know how you pronounce
his
name.
Love him.
Yeah, Henry. Obviously, it's Henry Blocher. Obviously,
Blocher. Okay, yeah, it's Henri Blocher.
Is that
Henri
his real
Blocher?
name?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I've been blotching name. Whoa.
Blocher. Yeah, the ER is with it's A, and he's a very great Baptist theologian. People sometimes think he's a pedo-Baptist, but he is not. Nice. And we had a podcast with him and a teacher from Faculté Jean Calvin de Aix-en-Provence faculty, which is
does it have subtitles? Can we watch it? Or?
Oh well, I can't. Well, no, it does not. It's not translated, but it was a 2-hour discussion on the millennium, and the guy in front was a former. Not Henri Blocher, but Pierre Sauvan-Chauny, who's teaching systematic at Faculté Jean Calvin. He just lately became a theonomist, but not a theonomist. Sorry, I raised that. A postmillennialist.
Okay, yeah.
What's the
okay? Yeah, but not the those postmillennialist what's the name of the theologian? It's the Theopolis guys. There are 3 theologians. They write on theology and politics.
Peter Leithart?
Yeah, Peter Leithart,
yes,
and Jordan something.
Jordan Cooper?
No, that's not Jordan Cooper. It's
James Jordan.
James Jordan, that's him. And then the third one. Well, I don't know. Is he federal? He's a federal visionist.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so
Peter Leithart was.
Okay, but Pierre Sauvan is not, and but he was explaining his eschatology and why he's hopeful, and it was very interesting having this discussion with Henri Blocher. Was going back and forth with him, and he's a millennial, and at some point Blocher said, he talked about Christendom, and he said something very interesting. He said, I used to be very opposed to it, like seeing it as something that was really evil, that was the scheme of the devil to persecute the true church. But at the same time, we come to appreciate something often when we lose it, and we're at the end of Christendom, and we're being post Christendom, and we need to find politic after Christendom, but he said. It was also a tool in God's hand to refrain evil, and he went to a point when he said that he started to believe that in the book of Revelation, when it says that I'm not sure if it's in Revelation or if it's the epistle of Paul, 2 Thessalonians, when it says the mystery of iniquity is active, but it's restricted, and he was connecting that with Revelation, and he said, I came to believe that it is Christendom that was used by God to refrain Satan's plan to unite all the nations against God's kingdom, Gog and Magog, and so we're past that, and so we believe that we're slowly getting to the Gog and Magog phase of history. And so Jesus could come very quickly, as the postmillennial thought it was maybe in 10,000 years from now or more. Yeah. So I thought it was very interesting to see Christendom, not so much in terms in theology as we often look at it and criticize it from our ecclesiology, but thinking about it more in terms of prophecy and eschatology, how God might have used it and it was prophesied in God's word. I didn't do the exegesis and see if it had any relevancy, if it was strong, if we could make a strong case for that. But I don't remember the question, but it just popped into my head, this conversation we had last week. But I would say that COVID brought many in the Reform camp and the Reform Baptist camp here in Canada, especially because the government was very aggressive and with their measure and closing churches and stuff like that and imposing the vaccine mandate on churches. So they kind of pushed it away, and that brought many guys into Theonomy and into the Doug Wilson and Jeff Durbin stuff. So that's one of the reasons why we're inviting you, because that view has infiltrated some of our churches and some of our gentlemen, that they are not too aggressive and too vocal about it, but we see that's a bit of the air they're breathing, and we wanted to give them some elements to chew on, and because they feel like most of the other reform guys are a bit weak, don't want to talk about politics and don't want to go into the cultural stuff, and that's why Doug Wilson and the people of his camp are appealing to this young generation and the Trumpian and all that. It comes together. So that's also one of the reasons why we're inviting you. And I think it's going to be very interesting because in the classroom, we'll have many people cheering up for you, but some will cheer up for Nathaniel Wright, the theonomist that will come discussing with you.
Yes, we've got Nathaniel Wright from the Ezra Institute. So the Ezra Institute is so just so people know what we're talking about here. This is kind of part of the IRBS School of Theology. We call it School of Theology. What do you guys call it there? Just a weekly kind of thing that you run?
Oh yeah, well the course we're doing, we had our own kind of institution. We call it the Serbe Centre d'études réformées baptistes, the Reformed Baptist.
That's what I was going to say.
Study Center. But for 2 years I've been a trustee with IRBS, and so we're closer to them now, and so Jim Renahan has connection all over the world with all the different Reformed Baptist communities, and so I think he's envisioning for IRBS that there will be the IRBS NZ and the IRBS UK and IRBS-PQ. So we're becoming the IRBS-PQ, and maybe we'll do like a yearly intensive course like that in Montreal. So yeah, that's and we invited the Ezra Institute that was founded by Joseph Booth, who's, I think, mono-covenantalist. I don't know if he's defining himself as a theonomist, Bonson type.
I think he goes by Neo-Kuyperian, but...
Neo-Kuyperian,
yeah.
So we wanted to have him, but now he's in the UK, so it's Nate Wright, and I think he's going to do a great job to come and present their view and have a friendly discussion with Mike.
Yeah. That's toward the end of the week, right? That we've got that set up.
Yeah, on the Thursday.
Right. So I mean, we're trying to. So basically, it's a two credit course, I think, for IRBS, that you can take it for credit, and some of the students are, and we're trying to like squish the whole semester into 1 week. So it becomes, there's a reason they call it intensive. It's intense. And there's a lot there, and hopefully we'll all be able to come out the other side. But yeah, certainly with a head full of stuff to go into a discussion like that, I'm sure would be helpful. But yeah, you've got the Ezra Institute, and where are they based? In Toronto, right? Or
they're mainly, I think, in Ontario, but they're trying to influence mainly through their website and podcasting, and sometimes they'll do conferences.
Yeah.
So where will we be able to see that debate? Are you going to host it on your podcast?
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to record the entire course. So if anyone, I can send you a link so you can put that in the show notes where people can already subscribe and they could buy the recordings of the course if they engage not to posting it anywhere. But we'll release some parts publicly. Probably this discussion, I think it will interest many people. It should be like a 3 hours discussion. Well, you will first do his case, and then we'll have them discuss for an hour and a half, and then questions. So it's not like a formal debate it would be like your podcast. We come and we discuss ideas, and I'll try to act a little bit as a moderator to make sure that it's fair for everyone to they can discuss.
Yeah, fantastic. I think just having a forum I don't like the formal debate kind of, those, right. I mean, they talk past each other, everyone just, they sort of prepare their own thing. And then they might have 5 minutes at the end where they're perhaps talking about the actual thing that everyone's interested in, which just frustrates the daylights out of me usually when I'm listening to things. So it'd be great just to be able to talk and, and just to see what he says about some of those, especially because he's a Baptist. So, that makes it a kind of especially relevant discussion, I think. But yeah, good. So people can get that afterwards, and is it too late for them to sign up? And I don't know
when will your show come out?
I'll try and drop that prior, so we'll just in the next day or two.
Okay. Well, so it's next week. So anyone around the globe that would like to participate through Zoom, if it's good with their time zone, they can join in, or they can just pay less and have. We sell it for $50 if they just want to buy the recordings for a 20. I think it will be 28 hours course. So I think it's good.
It's a good deal.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yep.
All righty. Excellent. Now, one more thing we want to talk about, and that's your podcast. What kind of stuff do you normally do? It's sort of inaccessible to us. We see it. Yeah. It looks good. We see that background. We see you, but that's where it stops, and maybe we see a famous person here and there, but it sounds like you're doing a really good thing. And just tell us more about it.
I started it. Well, I had other podcasts before that, and I was a bit searching myself, searching the right approach. So I was influenced by the Reform Forum, especially the Christ the Center podcast, and also the Mortification of Spin podcast. So try to merge the two. The mortification of spin is more connected with pastoral questions and church-centered issues, and very casual and funny, and using some worldly music. So I kind of copied that side of it, but also trying to have some more hardcore theology discussion. So we go back and forth with some different subjects. So anything like tomorrow I'll have discussion with two pastors' wife on what's the life of a pastor's wife like, and how do you manage the family life and church life, and all that. But I had Serge Thomas Bonino, who is the president of the Pontifical Institute of Thomas Aquinas in Rome. So we had him to discuss Thomism and how Thomas is received in the Protestant world. So and he knows quite well our theology. So it was I really enjoyed that discussion. He was very generous in his time because he's a great world-class scholar on Thomas Aquinas, and took time and come and speak in French. He's from France, but he's in Rome now. Okay. So yeah, it goes from I go anything that interests me. That's basically, so it's like you, but you guys you really have a very specific niche.
Well, we're really interested specific. In one thing.
We talk about everything we're interested in, which is one thing.
Yeah. Well, but that's similar. It's in terms that your podcast has been driven by your interest in theology, and that's what makes it interesting, because you're passionate about it. So I think more of a larger audience of different people, pastors listening to me, but also some lay Christians and some new believers, some people that so try to reach out to a large crowd, but at the same time, it's really driven by anything that I want to discuss, and new books. And so I've been doing that since 2016. I had a partner, my co-host, but our friendship came to an end dramatically, and because he had a double life, and we had to expose him. Not because we wanted to, but because how the Lord led things, and he's just last week he was still attacking me publicly. So that's very sad. Otherwise, I continued just by myself. I decided that I wouldn't drop the podcast. I came close to just drop everything, the podcasting after that. My name being so much associated with him, but just before Christmas, I went to Paris to give testimony at his trial in front of a judge in Paris. So that was a very difficult thing to go through.
Yeah.
Otherwise I do it because I enjoy doing it. It's it's time when you connect. It's like it's a good time for refreshing and see your friends and having great discussion.
I actually watched one of your podcasts. It was in French. I didn't understand a word of it. But
I've had a similar experience where I sort of showed the kids, I was like, okay, this is Pascal. I'm going to stay with Pascal. And then we watched and it was like in French, and we just didn't stop. We just kept watching. And it was just this weird, like, whoa, like you just keep watching. It's mesmerizing.
I don't know if I expected to learn French by the end of it, but for whatever reason, I watched the whole thing.
Well, my daughter looks at me. My daughter looked at me and she said, "Dad, how did he do that with his mouth?" And I was like, well, this is the thing, this is amazing. This is what, but now I know you did the one with me in English on your podcast. Do you do other ones with English? Are there a few scattered?
I had one before that with Sam Renahan on the dissent.
Yes.
That's the only. I was someone. Doug Wilson offered to come on my podcast because I did one with Alexandre Saran. He's pastor in Lyon, and his father-in-law is in Doug Wilson church, and they're having some great disagreement over theology. So we did the podcast together on the Moscow mood and the Moscow things and all that. And he's very well aware of it. He's a Presbyterian, but he's on the right side of the force. And so after that, his father-in-law, who's close to Doug Wilson, said to Wilson, well, you were discussed about and they talked about you in this podcast. Would you like to reply? Would you like to be invited? He said, yeah, I'll go. So all the theonomists were pressuring me, say, well, you need to have Doug Wilson. And so I thought about it for a few days. I was not sure if I could, my English is not good enough to he's sharp. So I kind of declined having him on. I was tempted to have to make some views and have clicks, but so I would like to have maybe 1 or 2 episodes a year in English. I think it's just to reach out to other people, and so we'll see in the future.
Yeah, it's a great way for us to kind of get some insight into, what's happening at that part of the world as well, and just what you guys are doing. So every now and again, so let me just encourage, we'll put your link, and the 3 viewers that watch this will then know about. So if any one of those 3 viewers are French, are they in for a good time or what? I mean, they're about to be...
if your podcast blows up, you know who to thank,
You will.
You can pay us back later.
Yeah, exactly.
No, yeah.
I do thank you guys. It was very enjoyable to be with you.
It's great.
It feels like we've got thousands of things to talk about, and we need to just do this for hours.
So frustrating.
Can I just say, do you know what I think would be a fantastic conversation to have? Right. I don't know how possible this would be, right? But we get you on, Pascal. And we get your French Thomas Aquinas expert on, and we get David Van Drunen on, and we get Hans Boersma on, and we talk about listen, it's important.
He likes to dream big.
Hans Boersma is a key to this, right? So because you talk about Klein, Van Drunen, natural law, and disenchantment all at the same time. Right?
We should
and the role
summon,
of Aquinas.
And we should pull in Michael Horton, who says that disenchantment is not a thing.
Yeah, there's lots of people saying disenchantment is not a thing. But I'm saying, this is why I want to talk about disenchantment.
Yeah. Have you seen Horton on his mysticism trip? He's got a 3-volume coming out on mysticism.
Oh, has he?
And he's pushing back at this whole re-enchantment thing as it's got a Gnostic push. It's got a Neoplatonist push. That there's 100%. There's a landmine in there somewhere that needs to be avoided. Yeah,
it's totally Neoplatonist.
All right, it looks like we're ebbing onto our second interest. This is the only other thing that we're interested in.
Okay, there is another thing we talk about.
But yeah, it'd be good. It'd be good to like get C.S. Lewis and Klein and Pascal back on the
Tolkien.
show. We could just talk it out. It's just Van Drunen.
It's a great idea. It would be the equivalent of what Jordan Peterson is doing with his the Gospels. Have you seen that?
Having all those. He mentioned that last time. Yeah. Have you watched? That's crazy. It is.
I've listened to the first episode. That was very interesting. It's going all around, but it's great. I think culturally it
gives you insight,
have influence for people that are not. It's not edifying for the people in the kingdom, but all the pagans around the temple, wondering should we get in or not.
I think it just shows you at what level they're approaching it. And I agree, it is super.
There's a change in mood, but here's my, and I guess I'm always the negative guy, but what you win them with is what you win them to, and well, we've had a guy come to our church who came because of Jordan Peterson. But then as soon as I began to preach against all sorts of cultural Christianity, he stopped coming. So yeah.
Well, I suppose that
you can't be Kleinian and Petersonian at the same time.
No, but I do also. Here's my problem with Peterson. I run out of time. He just takes a long time to say things, and like I don't have the time to sit down and listen to his explanation of things. But I do find it extremely interesting. Like I feel like I could just listen to that guy all day because of the
different angle.
Just the insights, and whether it be helping me to understand where people are at, or just help, understanding his particular take on things, which are often just worthy of their own consideration. I agree. I could definitely spend some time on that, but time is the issue, man. I am coming to realize I'm a finite creature, and you got to say no to stuff. So that's what it comes down to. But on the
I'm glad you didn't say no to coming in Quebec.
No, I got to say yes to Quebec, so I got to say no to Peterson. No, so I can't read your book because I got to do this. No, yeah. But on the time point, I think, again, we could keep going, and we'll do this again if you're okay to do it, Pascal. Down the line, let's meet up again. Let's talk some more. But just for the sake of respecting your time, and I know you've got a lot on the go, getting organized for this whole thing as well. Let's round it up at this point. But we're back. We'll drop this. And then wait 3 months and drop something else. I don't know. Let me not make too many promises.
We'll give a report on Mike's lectures when he gets back.
Yeah, we'll
there'll be a whole debate that we'll be able to be discussing at that point.
Exactly.
Exactly. Good. Thank you, Pascal. Blessings to you, brother. And let me roll the jingle. It's our tradition.